The Gk2 is the Scout's first primary weapon. It is a hit-scan automatic weapon that shouldn't be too unfamiliar to most FPS players. For many players, the Gk2 seems to be a compromise between the M1000's high-damage single-shot approach and the suppressive fire of the projectile-based Drak. In practice though, that just isn't the case, and I'm here to illustrate why that is, and why some changes should be made to make the Gk2 more competitive. Disclaimer: I'm not just here to shit on your favorite weapon in the PvE game, just trying to inform the community as well as GSG that there are problems with the balancing with Scout, and that a large chunk of the community seems ignorant or dismissive on the subject and is hurting Scout players. With that out of the way, let's begin. There are several relevant categories that all weapons should be scrutinized under: damage, ease of use, and utility. Damage is rather straightforward. How many bullets or how long does it take to put down an enemy? Ease of use refers to how reliant on player's skill or attention a weapon is. Finally, utility refers to specific effects or usage that may not be tied to the previous two categories that could have emergent properties. When it comes to damage, the most important things to talk about are damage per second and breakpoints. Damage per second is key in taking enemies with a large health pool, such as a Praetorian. It is a similar measurement as time to kill, which I will be using during tests, since it's easier to measure. Breakpoints are more related to killing smaller or high-value targets. As a side note, I will not be using potential damage as an argument because it has many flaws that I will address later. At default, the Gk2 is capable of firing 7 rounds in a second. At 15 damage a pop, that is 105 damage per second. A hipfire M1K will do 55 damage at, optimally, 4 rounds per second, clocking at 220 damage per second. The Drak will do 9x13, or 117 damage per second. Already we notice that the base Gk2 has a rather low DPS. Still, we can explore our option by maxing out its damage and fire rate, without using any OC. At max damage and fire rate, the Gk2 can do 18x11, or 198 damage per second, whereas the M1K does 260 damage per second, and the Drak 176 damage per second. See, GSG does know what they're doing. The Gk2 is right in the middle. Or do they? The issue is that this setup for the Gk2 is incredibly demanding to build for. It takes the Drak 2 mods and the M1K 1 to reach their respective max potential DPS, whereas it takes a whopping 4 mods with Gk2 to barely even edge out the Drak. This mod tree issue is recurrent and central for the Gk2, so do keep it in mind. In any case, the Gk2 could be built for decent DPS, but it has to give up too many good mods to even make that possible. Now, I will concede that using DPS is not an end-all metric for damage, because it does not take into consideration of some factors. Let's take a look at the recoil pattern for the M1K on a clip dump. That's a lot of recoil. How about the Drak? More manageable. The Gk2? Yikes. So we've established that DPS is meaningful only in an ideal situation. It is still a good indicator for how long you can expect an enemy to reasonably survive, yes, but in DRG we have to also take into consideration of weak points, or the reverse of it, which is armor point. To reach our ideal DPS, we have to land every single shot on an enemy, without hitting armor points or missing entirely, so already, that is a tall hurdle to cross. Even in a sterile situation like a sandbox, this could be difficult to achieve due to weapon recoils, spread, bug animation, or even projectile speed like the Drak. DPS can be helpful as a general pointer, but in a chaotic situation like a Has-5 swarm, it hardly means everything. Which is where another metric may shine: breakpoints. For those unfamiliar with the idea of breakpoint, you could think of it as how many bullets does it take to kill an enemy. Now, what is crucial with breakpoint is that, in general, the lower it is, the better a weapon is at dealing with an enemy. We will use the Grunt as an example. At base, the Gk2 will be capable of killing a Grunt with 4 shots to the head. The M1K will do so with a single shot, and the Drak in 6. Again, the Gk2 is dead smack in the middle. Let's max out the damage and give the Gk2 more Weakpoint Bonus. At 18 damage and 1.3 times weakness bonus, The Gk2 takes 3 shots? Wait, the damage upgrade. They do nothing for the breakpoint. For the guards and the slashers, +1 damage does nothing. At +3 damage, you save 30 and 33% ammo for them respectively. A key to breakpoint change is that the bigger the proportional reduction is, the more meaningful it is. For example, the M1K by default has a 2-shot body breakpoint on a web spitter. Taking the damage upgrade brings that down to 1 shot. That is a 50% reduction. A similar idea for a good breakpoint would be taking damage and weakness bonus, giving the M1K the ability to one-shot an acid spitter with a headshot, run 2 shots with only taking 1 of the upgrades. Now, the M1K is the golden child of good breakpoints because its damage is substantial enough to allow for one-shotting various enemies. At the most ridiculous, it can one-burst a HAS-4 4P Warden with a well-placed focus shot. Back to the Gk2's mod tree. Just like with fire rate, we're again witnessing a lot of bloats in Gk2's mod tree. Not only are there 3 very similar mods, they don't even give any meaningful return when combined. This is considerably worse than the DPS issue above, because the lack of good breakpoints directly harms the scout's role that we will discuss later. You might be wondering why I haven't mentioned the Drak yet, and it's because for the breakpoint argument, Drak is an oddball. The Drak is inherently not used in the same manner as the other 2 primaries, meaning that it has its own quirks that make its damage upgrade comparatively more meaningful than the Gk2's. One thing must be made clear, the Gk2 is used no more differently than the M1K. You point at faces or asses, then shoot. Yes, I know, literally every weapon is used this way in the game, but this is more crucial for the scout because for him, being ammo efficient on certain targets is vital to his role in the team. High value target removal. This is why Scout's first 2 primaries are hit scan precision weapons. Hell, he even got a new crossbow to emphasize that. The point is that they are both weapons that can take care of enemies such as spitters far better than the weapons of other classes, often killing them before they can do real damage to the team. Engagements that are considered long distanced are far more taxing than typical ones because the odds of missing are higher. It goes without saying that having less recoil, more accuracy, and higher damage will make this process far more pleasant. Notice that the M1K has 2 of the 3 requirements, and recoil in truth only matters if it takes more than a single shot to down an enemy, which the Gk2 absolutely does need. Obviously, you're not going to be sniping some grunts from 50 meters away with even an M1K, but in a typical scout engagement range of say 10 meters, the Gk2 suffers greatly because it requires more than a single shot, which means recoil and spread suddenly become factors to consider, in addition to the bugs moving in general. In short, despite both being weapons that demand precision, the Gk2 with its poor breakpoints is inferior to the M1K for that reason alone. Potential damage is an argument that I despite talking about, yet it seems to be the only thing I hear from people who defend the Gk2. Potential damage is a fairly simple concept. You multiply the direct damage from each bullet to the magazine total or max ammo, and if you're feeling extra fancy, you can throw in some multipliers such as Weakpoint or IFG, or even Stun if they want to bring up Bullets of Mercy. In fact, let's find out what the potential damage per mag is for the 3 primaries. With no upgrades, all weak points, and let's throw IFG on top as well, the Gk2 will have 536.25 damage per mag, the M1K will have 572, and the Drak will have 514.8. Wow, GSG is really consistent. But here's the problem. Potential damage is like the unicorn. It's something that you can never actually get. It doesn't matter how good you or your build is, you can never actually get this number because you would never land every single shot on the target, let alone the weakness point. This is even more so on an aim-intensive gun like the Gk2, because you are more likely to miss eventually than you are with the M1K due to the need to have multiple shots landing. In addition, potential damage ignores other hidden metrics such as splash damage and overkill. We won't talk about splash damage as that is, for the scout, a Drak thing, but we absolutely have to talk about overkill, or wasted damage. Overkill refers to damage that exceeds the effective health of a target. For example, if a target has 100 HP, your bullet does 80 damage a shot. You need 2 shots to kill the target. Potentially you are doing 160 damage, but in reality you are only doing 100 damage, because that's all the health the target has. Now if you kill 100 target in a similar manner, you're effectively wasting 6,000 damage. And in DRG, you will be killing that many enemies. The Gk2 is egregious for its wasted damage. Here we're going to test out different combinations for the damage mods. What about slashers? Oh boy. Guards? Yikes. I'm not sure if average is a good indication for wasted damage, because it's all over the place. What is certain though is that there is a lot of wasted damage for the basic mob. The kicker is that wasted damage gets worse with IFG plus BOM with trash mobs. Obviously you don't want to throw an IFG for every single enemy, but that's another reason why the potential damage with IFG argument is so flawed. It is completely unrealistic, and it makes so many assumptions that you can never reliably achieve. You can naturally switch to a secondary to finish your targets off, but the scout only has one secondary that can economically finish off stragglers, and frankly speaking, this is just a pain to do every time. Keep in mind that the overkill issue exists for the M1K as well, but the difference is that the M1K can actually hit various breakpoints with the right setup, such as taking down a guard with a focused shot burst or a web spitter with a body shot, but we won't talk about that today. We've already touched on the topic of ease of use. Many people claim that the Gk2 feels or works for them better than the M1K, though obviously that's just a preference thing, an opinion so to speak. But like I said earlier, the Gk2 is used inherently the same as the M1K. This is problematic because the Gk2 doesn't have good breakpoints, and each additional shot means more recoil and more spread. The higher the breakpoints are, the more aim intensive the gun gets, especially since you're not exactly swimming in ammo like most other classes. I suspect when people say the Gk2 works better for them when it comes to the ease of use, it's probably because they think them missing a few shots here and there feel less punishing than with the M1K, which has a very small clip. Only in truth, it is just as, if not worse, for the Gk2 to miss shots than the M1K, because unlike the M1K, the Gk2 has an awful potential kill per mag ratio. Yes, this is very similar to potential damage per mag, so it's not the perfect argument, but ask yourself this: how much more likely are you going to kill 2 or 3 grunts per clip with the M1K than with the Gk2 in an organic situation? I can tell you, because of how much less aim intensive the M1K is thanks to its good breakpoints, I am far more consistent and confident with the default M1K that I might be able to get closer to the magic number of 8 grunts per clip. With the base Gk2, you can at the very most get 6 kills per mag. With the plus 3 damage setup, you may expect 8 grunts, and you will never get that many unless you are an aimbot incarnate, because you literally can only have 1 bullet in the entire mag not hit the weakness point if you want to achieve either 6 or 8 kills. With the clip upgrade for the M1K, we're looking at 14 kills per clip, and for the upgraded mag Gk2, that is potentially 8 grunts or 11 grunts with the optimal setup, both of which will leave 1 grunt barely alive. And we aren't even talking about blow through rounds with the M1K, which the Gk2 simply has no access to. Gk2 allows for so few mistakes per magazine due to the poor breakpoint that missing with it is actually much more punishing than with the M1K. I personally think that the people who use this argument to defend the Gk2 just seem to like playing suboptimally or something, because if they think the M1K is hard to aim with, they're probably doing even worse with the Gk2. Finally, we have to talk about the utility of the Gk2. Primarily speaking, the Gk2 has 2 mods that are actually unique, at least prior to Season 2, which are T5's Battle Frenzy and Battle Cool. Now, being unique isn't necessarily the same as being good, but these mods are certainly making the Gk2 stand out more. However, these two mods do not fundamentally change the way the weapon is used. Like I've been saying all this time, a key problem with the Gk2 is its lackluster mod tree. The Gk2, no matter how you build for it, has the same playstyle, which is just a generic automatic weapon. The M1K on the other hand can be built as either a focus shot sniper or a general crowd clearing battle rifle, even without the use of OCs. The drag can be an incredible source of constant DPS, or as a mini-me autocannon. The Gk2 has no answer for dealing with crowds, since it has no upgrades or even OC that allows its bullets to do area of effect, penetration, or anything that could improve its efficiency per bullet. Running away quickly is honestly pretty overrated, especially since the scout has a grappling hook. Battlecore is interesting, but ultimately just a side grade that addresses none of the weapon's weaknesses. In addition, both of these mods need to be activated with a kill, which may not be that big an issue since they're already kinda meh in the first place. But that kinda just means that they're not very good. Stun chance sub is okay, but it's a missed opportunity to not also increase the duration, as the boomsticks mod does. In conclusion, in regards to utility, the base Gk2 lacks flexibility in terms of what it can do, and in compound with its mediocre base stats and horrendous mod tree placement, the few utility skills are situational at best. So what about the OCs? Some people swear by their mother's name that the Gk2 suddenly becomes top tier with the right OC. Now I will admit I haven't really used the OCs all that much, but I don't imagine they will become much better outside of a test environment. We will only be talking about the non-clean OCs. First in the firing line is the overclock firing mechanism. For the cost of doubling the recoil, we get a hefty +3 rate of fire. Let's compare the recoil pattern with and without OFM. Now with T3 recoil upgrade. Not as bad as it seems. This is quite obviously meant to be a DPS OC that focuses on taking down big targets quickly or at close range. First, let's explore the option of maximum DPS. Note that I didn't include T1B for most of the OFM tests, because to be honest, the results disappointed me greatly, and the gun became unbearably difficult to operate. Do yourself a favor and never run this in a serious game. Here is the Gk2 with OFM, with T1B and +3 damage. Average time to kill is 4.345 seconds, with 35 bullets consumed. Next is the test with no T1, +3 damage and no T5 mods. Average time to kill is 4.54 seconds, with 35 bullets consumed as well. So here you see the difference in TTK hardly exists. If we want to take down a Praetorian without reloading, we have to activate IFG, take T2A damage, T3C and T4A. This setup will kill with 31 bullets, with an average time to kill of 3.14 seconds from the test. Removing the outlier puts it at 3.04 seconds. With the IFG, the average time to kill is 5.9 seconds, and the ammo consumed is 41. As you can see, if one wants to be able to minimize the TTK, he absolutely has to take T3's magazine upgrade. This will stay true for the next two OCs because they are, well, basically all doing the same thing. Now let's look at Bullets of Mercy, which reduces maximum magazine capacity by 5, but does 33% more damage to enemies afflicted with a status effect. As far as I know, this bonus does not stack with more ailments. The IFG's Electro Field is unique in that it is considered an ailment, with the effect of causing enemies to take an additional 30% damage. This means that damage dealt with IFG and BOM active will be 1.33 by 1.3, or 1.729 times the initial value. Note that without IFG, stun may play as a factor for bonus damage, so we will see if that makes a difference first. With all damage related mods in T1B, no IFG, BOM Gk2 has an average time to kill of 5.93 seconds, consuming 36 to 38 bullets. The discrepancy in ammo spent is likely due to the random stun chance, but a few milliseconds don't really matter. Now with T5C, all damage related mods with T1B, no IFG, BOM Gk2 now has an average time to kill of 5.79 seconds, consuming 36 to 37 bullets. I'm not sure why one of the kill times was much shorter at 5.43 seconds, but again I think it's because the stun perhaps procced an extra time or two there, leading to more damage. The sad conclusion is that T5C isn't a consistent way to increase damage with BOM, because you can't dictate when the stun happens, and the stun duration is too short at 1.5 seconds. Honestly, I was kinda disappointed that this T5 mod didn't have any real synergy with BOM. If T5C actually increases duration, the difference may be more substantial. Now let's use an IFG to get the most damage. With all +3 damage upgrades, BOM plus IFG without T1 takes 23 rounds to kill a Praetorian. The time to kill is 5.05 or 4.976 seconds without the outlier. With the T3C mag upgrade, BOM plus IFG takes 24 rounds to kill Praetorian. TTK is 3.37 seconds. This is a trend that you might have noticed. For T3, there's almost no real reason to take anything besides T3C magazine, because this can shave down your TTK for a Praetorian by almost 2 seconds, since with the right setup you can finish one off without reloading. One may at least argue for T3A if he is using OFM, but T3B is just irredeemable for either OFM or BOM, as it actually only increases the TTK instead of lowering it. The worst part is that it isn't even all that effective at improving ammo economy. BOM with +3 damage and IFG can save you one more bullet from 24 to 23. And for OFM, you save 4 bullets from 35 to 31. Taking the +3 damage for either BOM or OFM requires 1 reload per Praetorian. Never run damage for T3. Its benefit is minuscule, and it actually harms the weapon's time to kill. Finally, let's take a look at AI Stability Engine. AI trades -2 fire rate and -2 direct damage for 0, that's right, 0 recoil, 2.11 times spread recovery, and +40% weakness bonus. It should be noted that AI is the only setup that will allow the Gk2 to 2-shot grunts with minimal overkill. This is the only case in which you may consider taking both T2A and T3B. For this test, T1B will be activated at all time, since T1A is not really helpful for AI and T2B at least makes the fire rate bearable. At +3 damage, AI requires 34 shots to put down Praetorian, at an average time to kill of 6.62 seconds. With IFG, this number drops 26 shots, time to kill is now 5.325 seconds. With the magazine upgrade at T3, AI needs 36 shots to put down a Praetorian. The average time to kill is 6.88 seconds. And with IFG, this number drops to 28 rounds. Average time to kill is 3.91 seconds. The fact that this exists should be considered a war crime. Now that the math part is complete, let's go over some key findings. 1. Across the board, magazine upgrade is basically the only logical choice in T3. The increase in sustained DPS is massive, especially against larger monsters. 2. T3B damage upgrade is useless in all but one scenario, which is AI for 2-shotting grunts. 3. With IFG active, there is a small difference between ammo efficiency. Ranked, it'll be BOM, AI, then OFM, last place. 4. In terms of the best TTK, OFM and BOM are tied, and AI comes in last place. Let's talk about the issues with each of the 3 OCs. OFM is obviously the standard DPS powerhouse OC with no gimmick. The problem is that DPS is relevant only if the enemy has a large health pool. In other words, its value is significantly reduced against smaller monsters. For example, you wouldn't consider your DPS against a swarmer. At most, you just need over 14 damage to kill one, which only a few weapon has to consider anyway. OFM's increase in fire rate also means an increase to recoil. and that's not even considering the doubled aim punch. In short, OFM may help with killing larger enemies in certain situations, but it does not help with killing grunts in any way, and may even lead to more wasted ammo due to the increased recoil. You could take recoil control over magazine in T3, but then your DPS takes a huge penalty for Praetorians because you then have to reload during a burst down. DPS honestly doesn't matter if you can't sustain it. For weapons that have very fast reload speed like the Warhawk when reload cancelling, this may not be an issue at all. The Gk2, however, doesn't have such a trait. OFM is not only a potential harm to your overall ammo economy, it isn't even the best at the Praetorian test. Even without the use of IFG, it barely edges out BOM with T1B. And with IFG, BOM without T1B barely loses out to the OFM. With T1B on, it's clear that BOM will be better at both contests. And in either case, OFM has poor ammo efficiency. I give OFM a hard pass. It may seem like a lot of fun to be able to put so much lead down the range, but it is definitely not a good OC for the current Gk2. Bullets of Mercy is, in my opinion, far too overrated. Whenever people defend the Gk2, they always bring up this OC. The problem with BOM is that it only works when your opponents are inflicted by some sort of ailment. The true crime is that while you could take T5C, it is too inconsistent, and the duration is too short to be helpful. We're talking about 40% chance to stun per round. This means you should expect a stun every 3 shots. But RNG is a real bitch, and since you can infinitely reset and stack stun, you can't have 100% upkeep this way. And then comes the IFG argument. I don't even want to bring this up because I feel like this is an insult to players with half a brain. But the fact is, many people don't seem to realize that IFGs don't grow on trees, and you can't just lob one every time you see a Praetorian. Furthermore, there are always situations where you cannot effectively use an IFG, like being on uneven grounds or in a small tunnel. Sometimes you don't even have an IFG, whether by choice or by simply running out. And for people who claim that your teammates could set them on fire or something, guess what? They'll just straight up kill them before the scout comes in. The mystical 27,000 total damage is such a tired talking point that anyone who says it should just be promptly ignored. In conclusion, BOM's performance is too situational. It is decent when all conditions are met, but otherwise it's just putting a dent on your precious 25 round magazine. Finally, AI Stability Engine. This is perhaps just as egregious as OFM. It doubles down on trying to make the Gk2 into the M1K, but it is so much more punishing on bad aim than even OFM. The -2 direct damage isn't that horrifying, sure, since it's not like Gk2 wasn't already terrible with body shots, but regardless it is still more punishing than either OFM or BOM. AI Stability Engine is such a confusing OC, it would seem like it is meant to be a single target DPS OC, but the reduced fire rate hurts the DPS a lot. Most would probably choose T1B over T1A, since T1A is a wasted bot on this OC. You do get pinpoint accuracy for every shot, but in what scenario would you need that for ever? The Gk2 is already very accurate even without AI Stability Engine. Going for both is just an overkill. So you should take T1B in, dare I say, every case. Now this is what's troubling. Even with T1B, the fire rate is actually just the default 7 rounds per second. Despite the additional weakness bonus, the DPS is still atrocious compared to other options. In fact, without the additional magazine size, AI without IFG can never finish a Praetorian with a single magazine. This is why its DPS is so horrendous compared to the other options. Wanna hear the real travesty here though? With +3 damage and IFG and +2 with 10 rounds and no IFG, AI is literally 1 bullet short of finishing a Praetorian off. And with IFG, running +3 damage still has a sluggish TTK that is on par with BOM with no additional fire rate upgrade. And the ammo efficiency isn't much better either. Even for the ideal setup, which is IFG with +2 damage and +10 magazine size, AI TTK is only slightly better than OFM of the same setup and worse than BOM. So AI isn't a good single target killer, is it then a good crowd killer? No, as if that wasn't apparent enough. Like I said, AI doubles down on weakness damage. Remember the trifecta of marksman weapon? Recoil, accuracy, and damage. AI has granted us both recoil and accuracy, but it does not grant us enough damage. The only significant breakpoint it gives is 2-shotting a grunt if you take +3 damage. For guards, the required bullets are down from 7 to 6. And for slasher, it doesn't even do a thing besides giving you a ton of wasted damage. In summary, AI Stability Engine is a crippled M1K mockery. I won't deny that it feels nice to be using a laser rifle, but not when it's just a glorified Nerf gun when I don't hit the head. Now that I'm done trashing all your favorite OCs, I'm going to analyze some fundamental problems of the Gk2. Honestly, at first I wasn't comfortable with talking about the OC for the Gk2, but with these simple tests, I think I know what the issues are. First, the 3 OCs examined here are all essentially trying to do the same thing: increase DPS for taking down a single target. This is problematic because there is really only one setup which fulfills this role for the Gk2. This is not good for build variety, and it's also not good for gameplay variety. Secondly, the Gk2's base stats and mod trees are simply subpar. There's so many redundant mods that are just flat number increase, and they don't even make changes substantial enough to change the way the weapon is used, or the role it is supposed to fulfill. Why are there 2 fire rate mods? Why are there 2 damage mods? Worse still, mods that are definitely not equivalent in value are competing against one another. Why is +2 damage competing with +100 rounds? Why is recoil competing against magazine size? And why is +1 damage even a thing? And because the gun's base stats are just so poor, taking these mods just feel like you're trying to make up for its shortcomings, instead of increasing its strength. And what is this supposed strength of the Gk2? I honestly can't say. As a single target killer, the M1K blows it out of the water because of its high damage and focus shot, and the drag with its exorbitant sustainability. As a crowd killer, the M1K not only has good breakpoints, but also super blow through rounds. The drag even has splash damage that can melt a horde of enemies. And people who think it's easier to use the Gk2 than the M1K or drag need to get real. The Gk2 is a scuffed M1K that is more demanding of your aim because you need to land more shots. And with the drag, you don't even have to aim at the bugs if you have certain setups. The jack of all trade argument really does fall apart. Instead of being good at all things, the Gk2 just kinda sucks at everything. This concept of having something as a jack of all trade in a class-based game is hardly ever executed correctly. It's always either overpowered or crap. And for the Gk2, we know what it is. So what should be done to the Gk2? After consulting with a proponent who shares a similar view, I think there are at least some direction that GSG must take to get the Gk2 out of its mediocrity jail. Firstly, changes must be made to the base stats. The base profile of the weapon, meaning damage, fire rate, magazine size, etc., should all receive upward adjustments. Secondly, the mod tree needs to be trimmed and reworked. Redundant mods should be either combined or with the increase in base stats completely removed or replaced. Additionally, reshuffle the mod tree to make certain mods more competitive. No more +1 damage competing with +10 rounds. This is just silly. Finally, the OCs all need to be reworked. Half of the Gk2's OCs are clean. While that is okay in the case of most weapons, it isn't for the Gk2 because it is already a very generic weapon. Either improve the OCs or change them entirely. Some suggestions include introducing an OC that grants elemental rounds, perhaps at random. Seeing homebrew powder is already a thing, why not just double down on that? Perhaps an OC that augments the on-kill effects. It is such a waste to not go further on the one thing that is uniquely Gk2. Perhaps a combo-based OC that buffs the Gk2 when you land consecutive headshots, or some sort of stacking effect that makes the Gk2 stronger per kill. An OC that actually gives the Gk2 an option to deal with Horde similar to the Stubby or M1K. An OC that makes the Gk2 into a machine gun with increased ammo capacity but reduced weakness damage. Something that makes the Gk2 into a burst weapon with pinpoint accuracy. There is a lot that can be done to make the Gk2 into a highly modular weapon. Well, that is all I have to say about the Gk2. Needless to say, there are topics that I couldn't cover in the video, but this should have brought to light the most critical issues. I hope that GSG would discover this video and take our feedback seriously. The recent changes to the drag was the wrong direction to take. Instead of making the overpicked weapon weaker, GSG should have taken a look as to why the Gk2 wasn't being picked more. Now I don't know if they actually keep track of the pick rates, but there are only a few reasons I could conjure up for such a reaction to a Season 1 weapon after several months of not making any significant changes to it. Not to mention 2 nerfs in the span of 2 months. That's why we assume this is the case. Special thanks to NKP for helping out with the video. Hopefully we can one day see the current Gk2 as a not so pleasant memory. Goodbye.